My name is Naomi Reed. I am 36 years old. I am a senior corporate compliance auditor for a massive medical technology firm, and I am the fiercely proud, single mother of the most brilliant, resilient 8-year-old girl you will ever have the privilege of meeting. At my older sister's lavish engagement party, standing in front of 35 wealthy guests in a rented country club ballroom, my sister deliberately grabbed a microphone. She pointed her manicured finger directly at my terrified, trembling daughter, who was desperately covering her ears to block out the overwhelming noise. And my sister announced to a room full of our own blood relatives that this is exactly why some children permanently belong in institutions, not polite society. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a glass. I simply walked over, took my daughter's small hand in mine, and we walked completely out of the building. I naively thought that long, silent walk to the parking lot was going to be the absolute worst part of my entire year. I was catastrophically wrong. Exactly 14 days later, there was a heavy, authoritative knock on my front door, a state-issued badge, a thick clipboard, and a terrifying, fabricated list of criminal allegations against me so unimaginably vile and physically sickening that I could barely comprehend them as they were read out loud in my own living room. Somebody had anonymously called the Department of Child and Family Services and aggressively reported that my little girl urgently needed to be legally rescued from her own mother. But here is exactly what my arrogant sister absolutely never understood about the quiet, compliant sibling she had been ruthlessly stepping over her entire life. When I am genuinely terrified, I do absolutely not raise my voice. I do not panic. I get rigorously clinically organized, and by the time the tables finally violently finished turning, my sister would permanently lose a great deal more than just a flawless engagement party. Welcome back to Shattered Hearts. This is the exclusive sanctuary where toxic families are finally forced to face their hardest, ugliest truths, and the quiet, invisible people finally discover their titanium strength. If you profoundly believe that every single child on this earth deserves to be fiercely protected and loved exactly as they are, drop a comment below and be absolutely sure to subscribe. Now, I need to take you all the way back to the foundation so you deeply understand exactly what was at stake. I have worked in high-level corporate compliance for over a decade in the Seattle area. My entire professional existence revolves around meticulously analyzing data, identifying catastrophic systemic failures, and ruthlessly ensuring that heavily regulated organizations follow the absolute letter of the law. My career paid for the beautiful, quiet, 3-bedroom house in the suburbs that my daughter, Sophie, and I safely call our sanctuary. It is absolutely not a sprawling mansion, but every single square inch of that house was painstakingly designed around my daughter's unique nervous system. I officially adopted Sophie when she was 4 years old. She had survived a horrific, profoundly traumatic early childhood in the foster care system before she finally came to me. Because of that severe early trauma, Sophie struggles with a profound sensory processing disorder and a severe, stress-induced verbal stutter. She is incredibly articulate, fiercely intelligent, and possesses a memory that rivals a supercomputer. She loves geology with a passion that borders on obsession. She knows the exact mineral composition, Mohs hardness scale, and geographic origin of over 200 different rocks. Her bedroom shelves are lined with polished obsidian, amethyst, and raw quartz. She loves the heavy, solid, predictable weight of stones, but unpredictable, chaotic human environments are her absolute kryptonite. Sudden, sharp noises, shouting voices, overlapping crowds. When the ambient volume of the world gets too terrifyingly loud, Sophie's nervous system violently redlines. She covers her ears, her breathing hitches, and she desperately needs to retreat. We built a specific, dedicated safe corner in her bedroom. It features a heavy, dark blue weighted blanket, a massive corduroy beanbag, and a small lamp equipped with a dim amber bulb. We also never, ever leave the house without her industrial-grade noise-canceling headphones. That sensory corner and those headphones have successfully saved more challenging evenings than I can possibly count. I am absolutely not standing here arrogantly telling you that I am a flawless, perfect mother. I am telling you, with absolute certainty, that I am a relentlessly present one. 10 years in corporate auditing teaches you one invaluable psychological skill above all others. In the middle of a massive 5-alarm crisis, you consciously lower your voice. You rely entirely on protocols. I have lowered my voice through agonizing night terrors, explosive sensory meltdowns, exhaustive special education school board meetings, and lonely, terrifying trips to pediatric specialists. I just absolutely did not know that I was about to urgently need that specific clinical skill to survive my own biological family. To accurately picture my family, you must vividly picture a Sunday brunch at my mother's sprawling, gated estate. My mother, Vivian, is 64 years old. She is a wealthy, socially obsessed widow who runs her immaculate kitchen exactly like a tyrannical federal courtroom. My sister, Chloe, is 31, 5 years younger than me, and she is the family's ultimate shining exhibit. Chloe is a highly successful, aggressively ambitious luxury real estate broker. She sells multi-million-dollar waterfront mansions to tech executives. She possesses a flawless, surgically enhanced face, a wardrobe that costs more than my annual mortgage, and a social media presence carefully curated to project absolute, unadulterated perfection. Chloe literally alphabetizes her designer shoe collection, and if I am being brutally honest, she heavily alphabetizes her relatives as well. I have always permanently ranked somewhere slightly below the imported crystal glassware. At those mandatory Sunday brunches, my mother would warmly pat Chloe's manicured hand and proudly announce to the table that Chloe had truly made something spectacular of the Reed family name. Then, Vivian would turn her gaze to me. She would offer that tired, charitable, pitying smile, the exact smile you give a beggar on the street, and ask, "How are you holding up, Naomi?" Not, "How are you doing? How are you holding up?" Exactly as if my entire existence was a crumbling, pathetic ceiling that was perpetually about to collapse. And when it came to Sophie, my mother adamantly, violently refused to use the medical terms trauma or sensory processing disorder. She dismissively called it that ridiculous label, that absurd label you continuously let those quack doctors put on her, Naomi. Vivian would sigh, waving her hand dismissively, while my brilliant 8-year-old sat a mere 3 feet away, quietly and happily sorting polished river stones by their exact color gradient, bothering absolutely no one. She doesn't have a disorder, she just desperately needs rigid discipline, a firm, heavy hand. She acts out because she lacks a strong father figure in that house to demand respect. I would calmly, clinically correct her, the exact same way I would politely correct a glaring mathematical error on a corporate tax spreadsheet. Vivian would dramatically roll her eyes, wave me off, and immediately change the subject back to Chloe's latest $1 million real estate commission. I kept forcing myself to go to those suffocating dinners. Anyway, you do that when you are deeply conditioned by toxic family loyalty. You relentlessly keep showing up, dragging your exhausted body to the table, desperately hoping that this specific week they will finally look across the room and actually see the beautiful, resilient child sitting there, instead of their cruel, preconceived opinion of her. My best friend and colleague, Sarah, used to sit across from me in the corporate break room, vigorously shake her head, and say, "Naomi, you collect other people's toxic, projected weight exactly like it's your second job. You carry their garbage for them." Maybe Sarah was entirely right, but I will tell you the exact, precise moment that massive, suffocating weight finally shifted in my hands. It completely shifted after what happened at my mother's annual New Year's Eve gala last winter. And if I am going to tell this story with absolute, unvarnished honesty, I have to tell you about New Year's Eve first. Last December, Vivian hosted the entire extended family and dozens of her wealthy society friends. Chloe proudly brought her brand new boyfriend, Liam, for his initial grueling family inspection. Liam was a highly successful structural engineer. He was tall, incredibly observant, and possessed a quiet, grounded energy that felt entirely out of place in my mother's chaotic, image-obsessed house. Midway through the extravagant dinner service, a massive, heavy silver serving tray was accidentally dropped by one of the hired catering staff right behind Sophie's chair. It hit the hardwood floor with a deafening, metallic crash that echoed violently off the vaulted ceilings. Sophie instantly flinched. Her fragile nervous system redlined. She clamped both hands tightly over her ears, squeezed her eyes shut, and began to rhythmically rock back and forth in her chair, softly humming to actively regulate her skyrocketing heart rate. That was absolutely all that happened. No screaming, no crying, no broken dishes, just a terrified little girl trying to survive a sensory spike. I was already calmly reaching into my purse for her noise-canceling headphones when Chloe abruptly stood up from the table. She offered a tight, humiliated smile to the wealthy guests surrounding us, exactly like a restaurant hostess apologizing for a cockroach on the floor. And she swiftly moved our 2 plates completely off the dining table and carried them into the dark, isolated butler's pantry, just for everyone's dining comfort. Chloe whispered viciously to me as she walked past. My daughter ate her expensive New Year's Eve dinner, sitting next to a humming industrial dishwasher, and I sat right there next to her, and I said absolutely nothing. Because I didn't want to ruin my mother's flawless holiday aesthetic. I swallowed the humiliation whole, but that was the absolute, definitive last time I ever swallowed it. So when the thick, embossed gold foil invitation for Chloe's lavish engagement party arrived in the mail that following spring, my immediate, visceral primal instinct was to formally decline. I intimately knew my sister. I knew exactly what she was capable of when provided with an affluent audience and a microphone. But then, Sophie found the shiny invitation sitting on the kitchen counter. She painstakingly sounded out the elegant calligraphy. The engagement party was being held at a massive, historic natural science museum downtown. Chloe had rented out the entire grand hall, which just so happened to perfectly overlook the museum's legendary world-class geological exhibit. Massive, towering displays of raw geodes, illuminated quartz crystals, and meteorites. My little girl looked up at me, holding the heavy cardstock, her entire face brilliantly lit up exactly like a stadium scoreboard. "Mom," Sophie stuttered softly, her eyes wide with pure wonder. They have the giant amethyst geode there, the purple one." "See, can we please go?" What exactly do you say to that level of pure innocence? She absolutely wasn't asking for the fancy party. She wasn't asking for the catered food. She was asking for the rocks. And she was asking for exactly one evening of simply belonging to the same family as everybody else. I took a deep breath. I said yes. But I deeply want to be crystal clear about something right now. Because it becomes legally critical later. I absolutely did not walk blindly into that engagement party. As a compliance auditor, I walked in heavily prepared, with a meticulous, documented plan in writing. It still absolutely wasn't enough to stop what my sister maliciously did. Because there are certain depths of human cruelty you simply cannot draft a contingency plan for, purely because your brain cannot fathom a relative actually executing them. Here is exactly what prepared looked like. 3 weeks prior to the event, I called Chloe directly and asked for incredibly small, reasonable accommodations, a designated table near the back exit of the grand hall so we could seamlessly slip out if the room was too loud. A simple heads up on any sudden loud noises, champagne tower toasts, DJ air horns, sudden musical crescendos. I explicitly offered to bring Sophie's blue noise-canceling headphones and her visual picture schedule so she would intimately know exactly what was happening next. Chloe listened to my requests the exact same way you listen to an annoying telemarketer trying to sell you an extended car warranty. "Fine, Naomi," Chloe huffed, deeply irritated. "Just make absolutely sure she doesn't freak out and touch the multi-tiered cake. It's imported." That was her singular, agonizing concern. The cake. I let it go, because I have had decades of brutal practice letting her insults go. I immediately moved on to the person who was actually running the logistics of the event. Chloe's hired event coordinator, a brisk, highly efficient woman named Jessica. I corresponded with Jessica via email and text message for 2 solid weeks. I still possess that entire time-stamped thread, and I thank God every single day for my auditor's paranoia. In explicit writing, I informed Jessica that we might need to quietly step out during high-volume moments. I confirmed our exact seating placement near the rear doors. In writing, Jessica professionally confirmed absolutely all of it, validating that she had marked our seats on her master digital chart. The night before the party, I carefully ironed Sophie's beautiful little navy blue dress. She meticulously laid her noise-canceling headphones squarely on top of it, preparing for the event exactly like a firefighter laying out their turnout gear. I stood in the doorway of her bedroom, watching her sleep, and I allowed myself to foolishly hope. All I desperately wanted was one single evening where my family looked at my daughter and saw the brilliant, beautiful child I see every day. Just once. That was the entire pathetic wish. The engagement party was held on a humid Saturday evening in June. Chloe had entirely transformed the museum's grand hall. Cascading white floral arrangements, dramatic uplighting, a seating chart printed on heavy glass exactly like a museum exhibit plaque. Roughly 75 people attended. Wealthy clients, luxury real estate developers, our extended family, and Liam's relatives. Chloe aggressively moved through the crowd, wearing a stunning, custom-tailored white cocktail dress, directing the entire room's attention toward herself exactly like a 4-star general commanding troops. I will readily give my sister this. She was terrifyingly good at manipulating a room. Sophie did absolutely beautifully for the first hour and a half. Her blue headphones rested securely around her neck, just in case. She politely shook hands. She didn't stutter once when she confidently told Liam, the groom-to-be, that the massive amethyst geode in the adjacent hall had a Mohs hardness of 7. And here is a minor, beautiful detail I absolutely didn't expect. Liam actually crouched down to Sophie's eye level, asked her highly specific questions about the crystalline structure, and he listened. He really listened for 10 uninterrupted minutes. My daughter talked passionately about silica deposits, and this tall, quiet engineer nodded along, exactly like he was receiving critical structural blueprints. I vividly remember standing by the appetizer table, watching them, and genuinely thinking that Chloe had somehow miraculously managed to marry vastly above her own emotional pay grade without even realizing it. Dinner was served flawlessly. The speeches were scheduled to begin. Over by the main stage, a hired sound technician was actively adjusting the massive speaker system for the toasts, unplugging thick black cords, forcefully plugging them back into the mixing board. I registered it the exact same way a trauma nurse notices an unsecured IV pole in a hallway, a potential minor hazard, but probably nothing. I visually checked that Sophie's headphones were still resting safely around her neck, and I turned my head to answer my Aunt Patricia's mundane question about my auditing firm. It is always the microscopic moments you only half see that violently come back to haunt you in the middle of the night. The sound tech leaned heavily over the mixing board. My sister triumphantly grabbed the wireless microphone from the stand to begin her grand toast, and the massive industrial speaker system let out a sound I can still vividly physically hear in my nightmares. Feedback. If you have ever heard a high-end PA system violently screech at maximum volume, you intimately know the sound. A piercing, metallic, deafening scream that physically vibrates through your dental fillings. Grown men in the room physically winced. Somebody's crystal wine glass loudly shattered against a table. For the average person, it was a highly unpleasant noise. For Sophie, it was a literal, physical fire alarm detonating directly inside her skull. She dropped her fork, clamped both hands violently over her ears, and immediately slid off her chair onto the floor, curling into a tight, protective ball, rocking and crying out in sheer terror. In the chaos, her blue headphones had slipped off her neck and skittered entirely out of reach under the heavy mahogany table. I was on the floor beside her in milliseconds. "I know. Baby, I've got you. I'm right here," I whispered, shielding her body with mine. I retrieved the headphones, slid them gently over her ears. Deep breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth. She was already rapidly coming down. She was doing her counting exercises. She was doing absolutely everything we had relentlessly practiced. She was being so incredibly, unfathomably brave. The terrifying sensory spike had lasted maybe 45 seconds. And that is exactly when I heard my sister's amplified voice echoing flawlessly through the sudden silence of the grand hall. "Well," Chloe sighed into the microphone, her voice dripping with venomous, theatrical exhaustion. "This is exactly why I explicitly requested a child-free evening." A ripple of uncomfortable, nervous laughter moved through the wealthy crowd. I slowly looked up from the floor. Chloe stood center stage, illuminated by a brilliant spotlight, holding the microphone, staring directly down at my traumatized daughter shivering under the table. And then, she said it. "This is exactly why some children permanently belong in institutions, not polite society." She spoke it directly into an amplified microphone, in front of 75 elite guests, pointing her French manicured finger directly at a terrified 8-year-old girl who was desperately clutching her ears. A couple of Chloe's superficial bridesmaids actually giggled. My mother, seated at the VIP table, intently studied her cloth napkin, refusing to look up. Absolutely nobody in that massive, crowded room said a single, solitary word in my daughter's defense. And the suffocating silence of those 75 people was somehow infinitely louder and infinitely crueler than the speaker feedback had ever been. Something inside my chest went completely, terrifyingly still. The exact freezing clarity that takes over my brain when a multi-million-dollar compliance audit uncovers massive, intentional corporate fraud. I stood up. I gently pulled my daughter up from the floor, firmly wrapped her small hand in mine, and I spoke at a perfectly normal, conversational volume to the entire silent room. "She is 8 years old, Chloe," I said, my voice carrying like a gunshot, "and she is leaving this room with infinitely more grace and dignity than absolutely anyone else currently standing in it." We walked completely out of the venue, through the cascading white flowers, past the glass seating chart, out into the humid June evening. At the heavy glass doors, I glanced back exactly once. Liam, the groom-to-be, was standing by his chair, halfway out of it, his mouth slightly open, looking exactly like Anne, who was about to say something that could violently alter the entire trajectory of his life. He didn't say it. Not that night. My cell phone aggressively lit up before I had even managed to buckle Sophie's seatbelt in the car. Cousins, aunts, my mother, unknown numbers. I drove home with the phone violently buzzing in the center console, exactly like a furious hornet trapped in a glass jar. My mother finally called at 10 p.m. I answered it, entirely because she was my mother, and I still foolishly believed that biological title meant something sacred. "Naomi, what on earth were you possibly thinking?" Vivian hissed through the speaker, storming out like a petulant child in front of Chloe's most important clients. Storming, I had calmly walked. She talked entirely over me for 5 uninterrupted minutes, about the deep embarrassment, about the massive cost of the catering, about poor Chloe's ruined, special aesthetic. Absolutely never, not once in 5 minutes, did she ask if my little girl was okay. And then, my mother delivered the fatal sentence that I will vividly remember until the day I die. "Couldn't you have just forced her to act normal for one single evening?" "One day, Naomi. That is absolutely all your sister asked of you." I stood completely still in my dark kitchen, holding the glowing phone to my ear, and I finally, profoundly understood that I could absolutely never fix this toxic family by simply being agreeable. "We will absolutely not be attending the wedding," I stated coldly. "Tell Chloe to enjoy her flawless, perfect photos. Do not call me again." I hung up the phone while she was still actively talking. I had absolutely never done that in my entire life. Then I immediately texted Jessica, the event coordinator, in writing. Calm, professional, and explicitly clear, Jessica. Following tonight's incident involving the microphone, Sophie and I are formally withdrawing from all future wedding events. Please immediately release our seats. Regards, Naomi. She wrote back exactly one line, understood. And for what it is worth, I am profoundly sorry. I checked on Sophie at midnight. She was wide awake, sitting in her safe corner, her headphones still firmly on, staring blankly at a piece of polished obsidian. She pulled one ear cup back and whispered, her stutter returning heavily. Mom, did I ruin Aunt Chloe's party? I felt my heart physically crack in half. No, baby, I said fiercely, kneeling beside her. You didn't ruin absolutely anything. You were perfect. She nodded slowly, not quite believing me, and I sat on the floor of her bedroom until she finally fell asleep. The lavish engagement party concluded without us. The upcoming wedding plans moved forward without us. I naively thought that was the absolute end of it. I thought the worst was over. It was only the opening skirmish. For 14 entire days, absolutely nothing happened. Or at least, that is exactly what I thought. The family group chats continued without me. The professional photos from the engagement party rolled through social media, Chloe glowing triumphantly under the museum lights. Liam looking handsome, though notably rigid beside her. Absolutely nobody called me. Nobody checked on Sophie. The silence possessed a very distinct, heavy shape to it, and I desperately told myself that the shape was simply embarrassment. I told myself that they had all had 2 weeks to sit with the horrific reality of a grown woman mocking a traumatized child through a PA system, and they were too ashamed to reach out. I was catastrophically wrong about the shape of the silence. What was actually moving silently, viciously through our affluent suburb that week was a highly coordinated story, and I absolutely wasn't the one authoring it. I got a sickening taste of it at the local pharmacy, when a wealthy woman from my mother's country club touched my arm near the register. She offered me a look of profound, patronizing pity. I am praying so hard for you, Naomi, the woman murmured softly. Families go through such dark seasons. We heard all about the terrifying scene at the museum, the scene. According to the toxic version rapidly circulating through the community, I had thrown a massive, hysterical fit, violently screamed at the bride, and physically dragged my poor, screaming, confused child out into the street, maliciously abandoning my own sister's celebration over petty, jealous, hurt feelings. Chloe had aggressively gotten ahead of the narrative, the exact way she gets ahead of a negative real estate appraisal. With aggressive spin and a flawless storyboard. I absolutely didn't argue with the woman at the pharmacy. I bought Sophie's vitamins, drove home, and made dinner. I remember standing at the stove, watching Sophie happily line up her quartz crystals on the dining table, thinking, we absolutely don't need them. We have our safe, quiet house. We have our routines. And that is absolutely enough. Then came Tuesday, 4:15 p.m., 2 sharp, authoritative knocks on my front door. The man standing on my porch wore a wrinkled suit, a state-issued lanyard around his neck, and held a thick, metal clipboard firmly against his hip. Ms. Reed? He asked, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. I am Mr. Harrison from the Department of Child and Family Services. We have received an urgent, anonymous report concerning the immediate welfare and safety of your daughter, Sophie. I am legally required to come inside, inspect the premises, and speak with the child. I deeply want you to understand exactly who I am in that specific moment. I am a senior compliance auditor. I spend my entire life analyzing heavily regulated corporate laws. I intimately know exactly what these state visits are designed for. I know they are absolutely not optional, and I know, with terrifying certainty, that the social workers absolutely do not get to tell you who made the anonymous phone call. So I did absolutely not slam the door in his face. I didn't scream. I didn't aggressively demand names. Physically felt the hardwood floor violently tilt beneath my feet, and I heard my own voice respond from a million miles away. Perfectly steady. The exact, chilling voice I use when a corporate server crashes during an audit. Of course, Mr. Harrison, I said calmly. Please come inside. She is currently in her bedroom. She has sensory processing issues, so she may not make direct eye contact with you. That is her baseline normal. He stepped inside. His eyes immediately began performing their ruthless inventory, and I stood in my own pristine living room, feeling exactly like a biological specimen pinned to a board. Understand this. I wasn't terrified because I had anything to hide. I was utterly terrified because I intimately knew exactly how this governmental machinery works once it is activated. I knew how aggressively these reports are prosecuted. I knew how long the agonizing process runs. Someone had deliberately, maliciously aimed the full, devastating weight of the state at my house on purpose. This absolutely wasn't a well-meaning neighbor misreading a playground bruise. Absolutely nobody who actually knew us could honestly believe Sophie was in physical danger. Which meant the person who made the call wasn't confused. The person who called was deliberately lying to the one federal agency possessing the absolute power to legally take my child away from me. Mr. Harrison sat down heavily on my sofa, opened his thick manila folder, and said, I need to go through the specific allegations with you. Then he read the first one out loud. And I physically had to grip the armrest of the chair to keep from collapsing. The anonymous report explicitly alleged that I routinely locked my daughter in her bedroom for hours at a time, that I viciously withheld hot meals as a form of behavioral punishment, that I actively refused her necessary medical and psychiatric care, and then the absolute final allegation: the child was recently observed, highly distressed, bruised, and screaming in absolute terror of her mother in a public setting in mid-June. I listened to every single horrific word, the exact same way you would listen to a complete stranger calmly describe your house burning to the ground while you are standing perfectly and dry inside it. Mr. Harrison watched my face intently while he read. Then he stood up and did his job. And I will fiercely say this for him. He executed it fairly, professionally, and entirely without cruelty. He walked through my kitchen. He opened the refrigerator, which was completely packed because I meal prep like a lunatic on Sundays. He inspected the pantry, the fresh fruit bowl, the child's artwork, proudly magnetized to the fridge. He walked into Sophie's bedroom. He did not find a lock on the outside of the door. He found a quiet, dimly lit sensory corner with a beanbag, a heavy-weighted blanket, an impeccably organized shelf of categorized minerals, and a highly structured visual schedule taped to the wall. He politely asked to speak with Sophie, completely alone, which is standard state protocol. I waited in the hallway with my hands rigidly folded, exactly like I was sitting in a pew praying for my life. Through the thin door, I clearly heard my daughter's voice. Easy, bright. Her stutter barely noticeable. She was excitedly explaining the exact mineral composition of a geode to him, and telling him that the corner with the blanket was her safe, quiet spot that Mommy built. When Mr. Harrison finally emerged, something in his rigid, bureaucratic posture had visibly softened. Absolutely nothing in that anonymous report matches the reality of this home, Ms. Reed, he told me quietly, but I am legally mandated to complete the entire investigative process. Formal interviews, school records, collateral contacts. We will need to speak with her pediatrician and her teachers. It brutally struck me later, standing in the scalding shower where the white-hot anger finally, violently found me seen, distressed in public, in June. There was exactly one public event we had attended in June, and there were exactly 75 people in that room. Here is exactly where I deeply need you to know what I did next, because it completely dictates the outcome of the war. I did absolutely not post a vague, dramatic status on social media. I did absolutely not call my mother, screaming hysterically into the phone. The night Mr. Harrison left, I calmly called my boss at the auditing firm, requested 3 days of emergency personal leave, and by 9 a.m. the very next morning, I was sitting directly across a polished mahogany desk from Diane Sterling. Diane is a ruthless, highly feared family law attorney located 2 blocks from the county courthouse. She wears silver reading glasses, tolerates absolutely zero nonsense, and charges a terrifying hourly rate. Her retainer was $5,000. I paid it instantly out of my emergency savings without blinking. When she raised a silver eyebrow at the speed of the transaction, I told her the absolute truth. It is infinitely cheaper than losing my child. Diane leaned back and walked me methodically through the terrifying reality. And I want to walk you through it too, because television constantly gets this wrong. A caseworker absolutely cannot just magically snatch your child based on a single phone call. Immediate removal requires undeniable, imminent physical danger and a judge's signature. What happens instead is a grueling, agonizing investigation. 30 to 60 days of invasive interviews, surprise home visits, and endless record requests. At the absolute end, the state makes a formal finding. Unfounded or substantiated, those two specific words legally follow a family for the rest of their lives. Your only job right now, Naomi, Diane instructed, tapping her expensive pen on a yellow legal pad, is to cooperate flawlessly, remain incredibly boring, and bury them alive in paperwork. You are a senior compliance auditor. You possess years of documentation that most average parents couldn't even dream of compiling. The state system runs entirely on paper, honey. So, we are going to violently outpaper her. I noticed the pronoun immediately. Her Diane had been listening intently to my entire timeline. The engagement party, the microphone, the specific month of June. She held up a sharp hand entirely before I could say my sister's name out loud. Suspicion is one thing, Diane warned coldly. Ironclad proof is another. Do absolutely not go accusing anybody yet. First, we win the state investigation. Then, if you are mathematically right about exactly who made that malicious call, we will aggressively discuss exactly what the civils law permits us to do to them. I liked her immediately. That exact night, after Sophie was safely asleep, I sat at my dining room table with a cup of green tea going completely cold, and I did the ugly, brutal math. Who on earth would call the state on me? Not my neighbors. Our neighbors actively bring us fresh vegetables from their gardens and wave warmly at Sophie when she plays outside. Not her school. Her special education teachers absolutely adore her, and mandated reporters do absolutely not invent psychotic lies about locked basement doors, the report specifically stated. Seen distressed in public in June. The only public distress in June was a 45-second sensory overload at a lavish engagement party witnessed by 75 invited guests, maliciously twisted into a horror story. Whoever made that call had physically been inside that ballroom, and whoever made that call had used a highly specific, weaponized phrase, refused her medical care. My mother arrogantly thinks behavioral therapy is absolute nonsense, but she would never, ever call the county authorities. She strictly settles her vendettas at Sunday dinner, where she holds the gavel and controls the audience. Calling the police is vastly too messy for her pristine image. No. There was exactly one person who vehemently believed some children belong in institutions. One person who had watched her captive audience walk out on her grand performance. One person who absolutely never forgave a slight in her entire, polished, narcissistic life, and who would explicitly view a state CPS file with my name in it as a convenient form of social housekeeping. I said it out loud to the empty kitchen. Chloe, and then I violently forced myself to accept the other terrifying reality, the one Diane had explicitly warned me about. I couldn't technically prove it. Reporter identities are fiercely protected by state confidentiality laws. The county would absolutely never tell me her name, and they shouldn't, because that vital legal shield aggressively protects real, terrified children with real violent abusers. My sister was cowardly hiding directly behind a federal law explicitly written to protect vulnerable kids, exactly like mine. You will not get a name from the state. Diane had warned me. Suspicion is absolutely not proof. Fine. Then I would aggressively build exactly what I could build. Deanne had assigned me homework. underlined twice on her yellow legal pad. Records. She called it the archive. I built the archive over one grueling, sleepless 72-hour weekend at my kitchen table, with my high-speed laser printer running so terrifyingly hot it physically smelled like melting plastic. 4 entire years of my daughter's life, meticulously documented in paper. Every single developmental evaluation from Dr. Eris, properly dated and signed, going all the way back to the initial diagnosis at age 4. Every single occupational therapy session log from her specialist, week after grueling week, immunization records, well child checkups, dental visits, the rigorous state adoption screening clearances I had passed flawlessly. Her individualized education program, IEP, from the school district, featuring glowing teacher notes calling her an absolute joy to teach. I meticulously 3-hole punched over 400 pages, and I locked them into a massive, heavy yellow binder with laminated, color-coded tabs. Because I am a corporate auditor, and I absolutely know how to present data to a hostile agency, somewhere past 3 a.m. on Sunday night, I opened Sophie's oldest medical file, and a tiny, faded plastic hospital bracelet slid out onto the hardwood floor. Baby girl. Ward 4I sat there on the floor, holding that tiny, fragile piece of plastic for one incredibly long minute. Just a mother, desperately terrified of losing her child. Nothing else. Then I put it safely back, closed the folder, and kept aggressively punching holes. Because sentiment absolutely does not close a federal case file. Ironclad paper does. When it was finally finished, I set the massive yellow binder on the table and stared at it. And I felt something I absolutely hadn't felt since the terrifying knock on my door. I felt heavily armed. 4 years of unrelenting, fiercely protective love, perfectly documented and 400 pages thick. Let her pathetic, anonymous phone call try to fight that. Monday morning, I carried the massive yellow binder into the stark, fluorescent-lit county office, and I set it directly in front of Mr. Harrison with both hands, the exact careful way you would gently deliver a newborn infant. He flipped slowly through the color-coded tabs, paused, and looked up at me completely over his glasses. "Ms. Reed," Mr. Harrison said quietly, "in 18 years of doing this job, absolutely nobody has ever brought me something like this." That exact same meeting miraculously gave me something I absolutely didn't expect. To formally assess the horrific allegations, Mr. Harrison was legally required to go through the intake narrative with me, point by specific point. And this time, he was forced to read slightly further into the anonymous caller's transcript. The reporter explicitly states the mother violently dragged the child from a family event, while the child screamed in absolute terror of her. He read neutrally. The reporter states the mother then aggressively withdrew the child from a major family tea gathering to maliciously isolate her from her loving relatives. I asked, keeping my voice as perfectly even as I could manage, whether the anonymous reporter had happened to accidentally mention exactly which family event. He gave me a strict, bureaucratic look that explicitly said he absolutely couldn't confirm anything. And absolutely didn't need to. Here is exactly what mattered. The cowardly caller hadn't described a vague, anonymous tip from a random grocery store parking lot. The caller had explicitly described the engagement party from the inside, utilizing highly specific details only an invited guest would possibly know, and had viciously bent every single one of them backward to fit a narrative of abuse. My gentle hand on my daughter's arm violently became dragging. Her sensory overload, crying at a blown speaker, maliciously became terror of her mother. My protective decision to skip the upcoming wedding toxically became isolating her from relatives. It was the exact same event, wearing a terrifying criminal mask. So, I answered the malicious lie the absolute only way I professionally know how. In writing, I unlocked my smartphone, handed it directly across the desk to Mr. Harrison, and I smoothly scrolled him through the entire time-stamped text message thread with Jessica, the event coordinator. The explicit seating requests made weeks in advance. The documented plan for quietly stepping out during loud moments, and the final message sent at 9:45 p.m. that exact same night, calm and meticulously dated. Following tonight's incident involving the microphone, Sophie and I are formally withdrawing from all future wedding events. Please immediately release our seats. Mr. Harrison read the digital thread twice, in total silence, and wrote for a very long time on his legal pad. The anonymous reporter explicitly claimed you fled the scene with a terrified child to avoid detection, he noted dryly. Your own text messages, sent in real time to the venue coordinator, definitively say otherwise. He firmly closed his thick folder. We will be formally contacting your daughter's pediatrician and her school administrators this week. That is the final step. Excellent, I said coldly. Start directly with Dr. Eris. I provided his direct cellular number on tab 4. You would naively think a single mother fighting the literal state for custody of her traumatized child would at least receive warm casseroles and frantic support from her own biological family. What I actually got instead was a chilling phone call from my mother exactly 4 days into the active investigation. Because in our affluent suburb, absolutely everything travels. Naomi, Vivian sighed into the receiver. Absolutely no. Hello. I heard through the country club that the county authorities have been out to your house. I silently waited for the maternal outrage on my behalf. Who on earth would do such a horrific thing? How can I possibly help you fight this? It absolutely didn't come. Instead, my mother let out a long, burdened, deeply theatrical sigh. Well, perhaps this is the universe's ultimate wake-up call, Naomi. Perhaps this is simply God's way of finally saying that damaged little girl desperately needs vastly more help than you can arrogantly provide on your own. If you had just kept her under proper control at the engagement party, absolutely none of this humiliation would be happening to our family name. There it was, the exact same toxic song with a brand new devastating verse. Make her normal, Naomi. If not for one evening, then for one federal investigation. I looked out my kitchen window at Sophie in the bright backyard, happily examining a piece of quartz under a magnifying glass, completely, gloriously, safely herself. Mom, I said, my voice dropping to absolute zero, I have to go. And I hung up on her for the second time in my entire life. It was getting significantly easier. The extended relatives went terrifyingly quiet after that. The massive group chat kept cheerfully rolling along without me, completely full of lavish wedding updates and floral arrangements I was no longer involved in. I stopped desperately explaining myself to toxic people who were clearly enjoying the tragic spectacle of my life vastly too much. But I deeply want to be honest with you about the psychological cost, because this next part is the part I am absolutely not proud of. I completely stopped talking to almost everyone. The fear was eating me alive from the inside out, and that suffocating silence very nearly cost me the absolute best, most powerful ally I completely didn't see coming. Here is the fundamental flaw about my personality, the fatal flaw my corporate job built into my bones. In a massive crisis, I absolutely do not call for emotional backup. I triage entirely alone. I had absolutely not told my best friend Sarah about the CPS investigation. I was paralyzed by the profound, burning shame of simply having a state file with my name on it. It was Sarah who violently cracked me open. A week later, she showed up unannounced on my front porch with expensive Thai takeout and completely refused to leave the premises. She sat me down forcefully at my own dining table, looked me in the eyes, and said, Naomi, you are the auditor who absolutely never asks for help when the building is burning. You are aggressively doing it again. Tell me what is happening right now. And I finally, violently let it all out. The terrifying knock on the door, the vile allegations, the suffocating shame of having a state worker inspect my refrigerator. Sarah reached across the table, grabbed my shaking hand, and said one profound sentence I will absolutely never forget. You have spent 4 grueling years fiercely, proving you would stand directly between that little girl and the entire hostile world, Sarah stated fiercely. Let absolutely somebody stand next to you for once. That exact same night, while I was drying dishes, Sophie gently tugged on my sleeve. "Mom," she stuttered softly, staring at the floor. Did the clipboard man come to our house because I re-ruined Aunt Chloe's party?" Absolutely, everything inside my chest violently shattered and immediately reset into titanium, exactly like a broken bone snapping back into place. "No, my sweet girl," I said fiercely, dropping to my knees. "You didn't ruin absolutely anything, and the clipboard man knows it." She went to bed entirely satisfied. I stood alone in the kitchen, physically shaking with rage, and then my cell phone rang, an unknown number with a local area code. I answered it. "Naomi," the deep voice said. "It's Liam. Liam. My sister's fiancé, the man whose lavish wedding I had formally withdrawn from." I very nearly hung up the phone immediately, instantly assuming Chloe was sitting right next to him in the room, perhaps listening on speakerphone, maliciously collecting audio material for the state investigator. He must have intuitively heard the terror in my pause, because he spoke incredibly fast. "Quickly. I am entirely alone. I urgently need to talk to you. Not on the phone, and absolutely not at my house. Somewhere highly public, whenever works for you." Somewhere highly public, the exact phrase people use when they desperately want a witness, or when they want you to feel entirely safe. I couldn't definitively tell yet which one he meant. I told him I would think about it, and then I did exactly what the old Naomi would absolutely never have done. I aggressively called for backup. I called Diane, my ruthless attorney, at 8 p.m., and she picked up immediately, because women exactly like Diane absolutely always pick up. "Go to the meeting," Diane ordered instantly. "Listen significantly more than you talk. Do absolutely not hand him sensitive information. Do not casually speculate about your sister, and take meticulous mental note of every single word he says." She paused. "If this is a malicious setup, we will explicitly know in 5 minutes. If it absolutely isn't, then Naomi, listen to me very carefully. The fiancé is inside the house. Whatever he desperately wants to say, it was powerful enough to make him dial your number a mere month before his own wedding." We met the very next afternoon at a crowded, noisy, neutral coffee shop downtown. My turf, corner booth, 2 black coffees. Liam walked in wearing a casual Henley shirt and the exhausted, haunted look of a man who hadn't slept deeply in a month. He sat down heavily across from me. He didn't even touch his coffee cup. He slowly took off his expensive engagement ring, set it deliberately on the table directly next to the sugar packets, and stared at it exactly like it was a murder weapon. "I owe your little girl a profound apology, and I owe you a massive warning," Liam began. He started heavily with the apology. "I absolutely should have stood up at that engagement party," he whispered, running a hand over his face. "I was literally halfway out of my chair, and I cowardly sat back down to avoid a scene. I have bitterly regretted it every single day since." I coldly told him I remembered exactly what happened, and that sitting back down in silence was a toxic family tradition he was marrying into. He almost smiled. Then the humor completely left his face. "3 nights ago, we were at the condo," Liam said, his voice steadying like an engineer reading structural coordinates. "I woke up around 1 a.m. Chloe absolutely wasn't in bed. She was out on the balcony pacing with her cell phone. I could clearly hear her through the sliding glass." He stopped and rotated his coffee cup exactly a quarter turn, as if he desperately needed his hands to be busy. "She was aggressively laughing," he said, swallowing hard. "I heard her use the word report. I heard her distinctly say, 'They will finally see exactly what that freak is,' and I heard her explicitly call your little girl a pathetic sideshow. She literally said, 'The little sideshow won't be ruining our family events much longer.'" I sat perfectly, terrifyingly still. He forced himself to keep talking. "I confronted her about it the next morning. She flawlessly laughed it off. She smoothly claimed I must have misheard her through the glass, claimed it was just stupid wedding gossip with her maid of honor." He looked me dead in the eyes. "Then, yesterday afternoon, she was on her cell phone in our garage, with the door slightly cracked. This time, I clearly heard the word allegations. I walked straight in, looked at her, and asked flat out, "Did you anonymously call child services on your own sister?" And she looked at me, Naomi. She looked at me exactly like I was painfully slow, and she sneered, "You are my future husband now. Start acting like it, and mind your own business." The crowded coffee shop clattered loudly around us. Baristas calling out names, people laughing. I thought about the agonizing look on his face at the engagement party, the courageous words he didn't say that night. Some men tragically take years to finally locate their moral voice. Liam had found his in exactly 3 weeks. I asked him the absolute only question that legally mattered. "Will you explicitly say all of that to the state caseworker?" He absolutely didn't hesitate, and I deeply need you to understand exactly what that profoundly meant. This was a man a mere month away from his lavish wedding, being aggressively asked to testify under oath that his brand new fiancé had maliciously weaponized the federal state against a traumatized child. "Yes," Liam stated firmly, "I will gladly tell the caseworker exactly what I heard, and if it legally comes to it, I will gladly say it in front of your entire toxic family out loud." I absolutely didn't cheer. I didn't reach across the table and gratefully grab his hands. I reached into my blazer, smoothly slid Diane Sterling's expensive business card across the laminate table, and said, "Then we execute this flawlessly. Call my attorney." Absolutely, everything goes strictly through the right legal channels, on the permanent record, where it actually counts. He nodded slowly, exactly like a man profoundly relieved to be handed a standard operating procedure. "Auditors and engineers. We are exactly the same species of animal." Then he told me the specific part that still makes my stomach violently drop to the floor. "That phone call in the garage yesterday," Liam whispered, leaning forward. "That was her second call. A follow-up." I clearly heard her say she desperately wanted to add specific details, because absolutely nothing seemed to be happening fast enough. He looked at me with pure disgust in his eyes. "Naomi," she actively called them again to maliciously make the allegations significantly worse. I looked out the coffee shop window at the bustling street, and I intensely thought about my sister at her pristine mixing board of a life, twisting the dials, adding horrific details, trying to destroy my existence. She boldly told 75 people my daughter didn't belong in public. I said quietly. Liam turned his silver ring on the table one final time, and then he picked it up and slid it directly into his pocket, not back onto his finger. "I almost married someone who absolutely isn't who she pretends to be in public," Liam said softly. "I have been violently finding that out, one phone call at a time." When we finally stood to leave, he shook my hand firmly, exactly as if we had just signed a massive corporate contract. In a very real way, we absolutely had. While my sister was maliciously adding fabricated details, my legal team was aggressively adding undeniable facts. Dr. Eris, Sophie's developmental pediatrician for 4 years, immediately sent the county a devastating letter I wasn't legally supposed to see, but Mr. Harrison proudly read a single line of it to me at our final administrative meeting, and I am going to carry that specific line in my heart forever. In 4 years of extensively treating Sophie, Dr. Eris wrote, "I have rarely, if ever, encountered a mother so relentlessly consistent, so medically educated in her child's specific needs, and so thoroughly documented. Every single appointment impeccably kept, every single medical recommendation flawlessly followed." Sophie's occupational therapist spent 40 minutes on a recorded line with the county and told me afterward exactly what she had testified. "In 4 years, I have absolutely never once worried about Sophie's safety at home. Not once." Her special education teacher called them directly from her summer vacation at a lake house to explicitly say the terrified, abused child in that anonymous report was absolutely not a child she recognized. The child she intimately knew came to school perfectly fed, beautifully rested, intensely loved, and completely full of geological rock facts. The absolute final county meeting was almost gentle. Mr. Harrison sat across from me in his office. He closed his thick folder. I legally cannot discuss the final findings with you quite yet, Mr. Harrison said, his eyes kind. But Ms. Reed, please breathe. You will receive an official letter in the mail very soon. Liam had kept his word. Through Diane, he gave Mr. Harrison a full, sworn statement. Absolutely everything he had heard on that balcony and in that garage. Exact dates, exact phrases, the malicious second call. No illegal secret recordings, no stolen cell phones, just a credible, first-hand witness with absolutely nothing to gain and an entire marriage to lose. Speakings legally, on the record, Diane called me into her mahogany office the very next afternoon and laid out the chessboard. Here is exactly where we stand, Naomi, Diane said, her eyes gleaming. The state investigation is heading exactly where it legally should. When the finding inevitably comes back, unfounded, that is your permanent, ironclad shield. But you may also desperately want a sword. She leaned forward. So here are your aggressive legal options. Knowingly making a false report of child abuse is a severe crime in this state. A misdemeanor, and infinitely beyond that, a false report made with explicit malice violently opens the door to a massive civil suit, severe defamation, intentional infliction of severe emotional distress. She tapped her pen, and with a highly credible witness like Liam actively testifying, a judge can absolutely be persuaded to unseal the protected identity of a malicious reporter. The confidentiality shield heavily protects the honest, Naomi. It absolutely does not protect the vindictive. She smoothly slid a yellow legal pad across the desk, with 2 columns written on it. We talked for an hour about exactly what winning would actually mean. I could ruthlessly drag Chloe through a public courtroom for 2 grueling years and watch my toxic family aggressively pick sides at Christmas forever. Or I could use every single ounce of this newfound leverage differently, vastly faster, and directly in front of the absolute only jury I actually cared about. The wealthy, enabling family that had watched me walk out of that engagement party and eagerly believed her fabricated version. I thought about Sophie happily lining up her quartz crystals. I thought about my mother's condescending napkin at Sunday brunch. I absolutely do not want my sister rotting in a jail cell, I told Diane coldly. I want her exposed entirely in the blinding light. Diane smiled exactly like a woman slowly sharpening a blade. Then let's build you a formidable folder, she said. The official envelope arrived on a Thursday in the absolute middle of August, exactly 6 weeks after the terrifying knock on my door. Department of Child and Family Services. Official disposition. I stood on my front porch and opened it with my trembling thumb, because if I had gone inside for the letter opener, I would have lost my nerve. Disposition! Unfounded! Cul's case. Permanently. No safety concerns identified. There was significant legal jargon below it, but those were the absolute only words that mattered. I read them maybe 15 times, standing in the doorway with the heavy summer heat rolling in past me. My hands violently shook. They absolutely hadn't shaken at the engagement party, or at the initial knock, or in the terrifying county office, but they shook uncontrollably then, when it was finally, unequivocally safe to let the fear fully process. Sophie was inside building a massive display for her amethyst geodes. I sat down heavily on the floor right next to her and simply helped her square up the display cases. And she gently leaned her head on my shoulder for exactly as long as she could comfortably stand to, which is about 4 seconds, and which is worth vastly more than solid gold bars to me. So, that was the shield. But you intimately know what a shield absolutely doesn't do. It doesn't stop the enemy archer from rapidly reloading. The family still blindly believed the engagement party story. Chloe was still out there aggressively adding toxic details. And then, the very last week of August, my mother called me with an arrogant invitation delivered exactly like a royal summons. Labor Day reconciliation brunch, Vivian announced brightly. At the estate, the entire extended family. It is deeply time to heal, Naomi. Chloe will obviously be there. I looked at the beautiful, unfounded letter sitting on my kitchen counter. Yes, Mom, I said smoothly. I will absolutely be there. I explicitly said yes for my own tactical reasons, and I prepared for that brunch the exact same way I once ruthlessly prepared for my federal auditing board exams. First call, Diane. She meticulously assembled what she ominously called the folder and walked me through every single page in order. On top, the county's official letter, unfounded. Case closed beneath it, a fully drafted civil complaint. Severe defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress, naming a Jane Doe reporter, completely ready to file with the court. Beneath that, a formal motion aggressively asking a judge to unseal the identity of a malicious reporter with a sworn witness statement heavily referenced, but deliberately not attached, and a cease and desist letter addressed directly to the same Jane Doe. Absolutely nothing in that folder was a bluff. Every single page was loaded, highly legal, and ready to immediately fire, and that intensely mattered to me. I absolutely wasn't bringing cheap theatrical props to my mother's mahogany table. I was bringing catastrophic consequences printed on premium legal paper. Second call, Liam. He had completely moved out of their shared condo and into a hotel by then, though the family absolutely didn't know it yet. Come to the brunch, I instructed. You will intimately know the exact moment. All I am asking is that you tell the unvarnished truth exactly once, out loud, in front of absolutely everyone. He was quiet for a split second, and then he said, I have been desperately waiting for somebody to ask me to do exactly that. Third call, Sarah. She eagerly agreed to keep Sophie overnight. My daughter had a bag packed for Sarah's house in 4 minutes flat because Sarah has a massive golden retriever and possesses absolute zero toxic opinions about noise-canceling headphones. Whatever was violently going to happen in my mother's sprawling backyard, my little girl would be safely eating pizza and playing with a dog, entirely far from the blast radius. Labor Day weekend arrived brutally hot and suffocatingly humid. I meticulously ironed a sharp, charcoal gray blazer, tucked the bright yellow legal folder securely under my arm, and drove the 20 minutes to my mother's gated estate. Chloe's luxury SUV was all ready, parked aggressively in the circular driveway. My mother's massive backyard was immaculately dressed for a grand theatrical reconciliation. A long mahogany table set under the ancient oak trees, twinkling string lights, the expensive imported tablecloth, a dozen wealthy relatives awkwardly balancing mimosas, and heavy expectation. Aunt Patricia and her husband, 2 older cousins, and Mom's pretentious neighbor from the country club. Because Vivian Reed absolutely never confronts family without a sympathetic character witness present. And there, at the absolute center of it all, stood Chloe, radiant in a pristine white linen dress, holding a tray of expensive appetizers. Exactly like a crown on a velvet pillow, she air-kissed her way aggressively down the long table, and when she reached me, she deliberately paused, tilted her head, and offered me a smile completely soaked in toxic charity. Naomi, Chloe announced, loud enough for the entire garden to hear, I am so incredibly glad you finally decided to come. I just deeply hope you are completely ready to finally move past what happened at my party. Move past, exactly as if I had accidentally spilled a drink on her shoes, instead of her publicly demanding my child be institutionalized. I am completely ready for exactly that, Chloe, I replied smoothly, taking my assigned seat. I set the bright yellow legal folder down directly next to my plate, as quiet as a linen napkin. Absolutely nobody noticed it. Well, almost nobody. Liam, sitting directly across the table, saw it immediately. His eyes locked onto mine for half a second, and something profound passed between us that was almost exactly like a nod, without either of us actually moving a muscle. Mom proudly stood at the head of the table with her crystal mimosa glass raised high. Before we eat, Vivian announced dramatically, this family has been through an incredibly hard, painful season. What happened in June deeply hurt everyone. She looked directly, accusingly at me. And I firmly believe that true healing begins when the person who caused the terrible hurt finally owns it. Family beautifully apologizes. Naomi. A dozen expectant faces turned eagerly toward me, exactly like sunflowers seeking the sun. My mother had meticulously convened this entire brunch, catered it, seated it, and aggressively aimed it all so I could publicly, humiliatingly apologize to Chloe. I put my hand completely flat on the yellow folder. Actually, Mom, I said smoothly, my voice projecting, you are entirely right. Tonight is absolutely about owning exactly what happened. But Chloe physically couldn't leave a spotlight unoccupied. Before I could say another syllable, she dramatically rose, pressed one manicured hand to her chest, and performed. Can I please just say something first? Chloe sniffled, her eyes glistening on perfect command. Naomi, when you violently stormed out of my engagement party, you stole something from me I can absolutely never get back. She delicately dabbed at a tear that had arrived precisely on schedule. My professional engagement photos have a glaring empty seat in them. My wealthy clients still ask me what happened. I have wept over this. She let her voice wobble pathetically, and the aunts murmured in deep sympathy, and my mother nodded along exactly like a metronome. And then, my sister got incredibly greedy. She turned to the table, lowered her voice into a conspiratorial stage whisper, and reached for the knife she arrogantly thought was entirely clean. And then, on top of absolutely everything, Chloe sighed tragically, we all heard about the horrifying CPS investigation. A shocked ripple went violently down the table. She pressed on, pouring syrup directly over cold steel. I am absolutely not saying anything, Naomi. I would never. But the county absolutely doesn't just show up to someone's house for no reason at all. Where there is smoke, there is usually fire. There it was. My arrogant sister, utterly unable to resist the spotlight, had eagerly carried the explosive subject to the table entirely herself, set it down in front of everyone, and happily lit the match. I remember a bee lazily drifting over the expensive fruit salad. I remember the string lights flickering on in the dusk, and I vividly remember feeling absolutely nothing I expected to feel. No blinding heat, no shaking hands. Just the level, floor-tilting, icy calm of a compliance auditor watching a fraudulent spreadsheet she has, finally, legally been cleared to expose. I am incredibly glad you brought that up, Chloe, I said, and my voice came out terrifyingly kind. Let's explicitly talk about the smoke. And I opened the yellow folder while the entire table leaned in. I took out the county's official letter first, and I held it up high so absolutely everyone could clearly see the embossed state seal. This is directly from the Department of Child and Family Services, I stated, my voice as level as a chart reading. Dated August 14th. I read them the specific line that mattered, incredibly slowly. Disposition, unfounded. Case permanently closed, no safety concerns identified. I passed the heavy paper to Aunt Patricia, who instantly put on her reading glasses. Since Chloe eagerly mentioned smoke, I continued, let me explicitly tell you exactly what the fire was actually supposed to be. Someone maliciously called the child abuse hotline about me. I looked around the silent table. This anonymous person told the county that I violently lock Sophie in her room, that I sadistically take her meals away as punishment, that I actively deny her necessary medical care. Around the table, silver forks had completely stopped moving. My mother's snooty neighbor had her hand clamped firmly over her mouth in sheer horror. That completely fabricated call sent a federal investigator directly into my home, I said coldly. She interviewed my traumatized daughter completely alone. She opened my refrigerator. I was forcibly pulled off my corporate auditing floor, while the county aggressively decided whether I was a physical danger to children for 45 agonizing days. My voice stayed flawlessly level the entire way, which somehow made the horrific reality infinitely worse for everyone listening. I actively watched the faces around the table violently change as the heavy words landed. Then, I laid the second stack of legal documents deliberately onto the tablecloth. The county absolutely does not tell you who makes a report, I said smoothly. That is the law, and it is a phenomenal law, and this cowardly person fiercely hid behind it. But the anonymous report described one very highly particular thing. I looked down the long table, establishing eye contact, face by horrified face. It described a specific family event in June, where a child was supposedly seen screaming in absolute terror of her mother, I stated. There were exactly 75 people in that room at the engagement party. The malicious reporter was undeniably one of them. The silence in the backyard got a thick, suffocating texture to it. Chloe's triumphant smile had completely set exactly like drying concrete. My mother abruptly stood up. That is absolutely enough, Naomi. It absolutely isn't, Mom, I said gently. Not quite yet. I placed the absolute last stack of legal documents on top, meticulously squared the corners, and named them out loud, one by one. A fully drafted civil lawsuit for severe defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress, ready to file. The formal legal motion aggressively asking a judge to unseal the identity of a malicious reporter, which the law explicitly allows in cases of malice, and a sworn witness statement already officially given to the county. I leaned forward. My attorney aggressively assures me the reporter's identity absolutely isn't a mystery anymore. It's just a legal countdown. Chloe's laugh came out with a violent, jagged crack right down the middle of it. This is completely insane, Chloe shrieked, her eyes darting around the table. You absolutely can't prove anything. Across the table, incredibly quietly, Liam deliberately folded his linen napkin, placed it on his plate, and stood up. She absolutely doesn't have to prove it, Liam said, his voice echoing in the dead silence. I actively heard you make the phone call. The devastating words went down that long table exactly like a dropped, shattering platter. My mother actually physically flinched. Chloe turned to her fiancé in agonizing slow motion, and for one raw, horrific second before the aristocratic mask slammed back into place, I saw her frantically calculate her exits and come up completely empty. Third night after the party, Liam went on, steady and relentless, exactly like a man reading surveyed coordinates. You were standing on the balcony. You explicitly said, they'll finally see what that freak is. You called an 8-year-old child a pathetic sideshow. You viciously laughed, Chloe. I was wide awake and I heard you laugh. He looked around the table, at the aunts, at the cousins, at Vivian, and weeks later, from our own garage, I heard her make a second call, Liam stated firmly. She wanted to add fabricated, malicious details because the first set of sickening lies wasn't working fast enough to destroy her sister. He looked directly at Chloe. I already gave a sworn, legal statement to the state. What happened next is the exact part I could absolutely never have scripted if I tried. My sister, the flawless event planner, the meticulous composer of perfect aesthetic moments, came completely, violently apart in front of her entire captive audience. She shot to her feet so aggressively fast, her heavy chair went entirely over backward into the grass. That is exactly when the screaming started, and I fiercely want you to notice something. The absolute only person screaming at that table was her. She humiliated me. Chloe screamed, aggressively stabbing a shaking finger at me down the length of the table. At my party, my perfect weekend. She maliciously made it all about that defective child, the exact way she makes absolutely everything about that child. Somebody had to aggressively do something to stop her. The wealthy neighbor from the country club was staring at her with open, unadulterated horror, and Chloe vividly saw it and immediately pivoted mid-scream into desperate tears. The pretty kind, the exact kind that had flawlessly worked her entire life. Liam, baby, you completely misunderstood, Chloe sobbed, reaching for him. You know how stressed I get. I was just venting. Liam didn't move a single inch. You're my future husband, Chloe shrieked. Act like it! I am, Liam said coldly. I'm the primary witness. She violently wheeled on me last, mascara tracking down her cheeks, her fingers shaking uncontrollably, and shrieked that I had maliciously planned this, that I had intentionally turned her own loving family against her at her own mother's table. I sat perfectly still, both of my hands resting calmly on the yellow folder, and I let the deafening quiet stretch on until she completely ran out of air. You were entirely right about one specific thing at your party, Chloe, I said, and I kept my voice as terrifyingly soft as a lullaby. Some people absolutely do not belong in polite public society. You just arrogantly pointed at the wrong person. Then I told her, in front of absolutely everyone, exactly what happens next. The legal terms were incredibly simple, and I listed them the exact way I would list a corporate termination sequence. 1. You write a full, unvarnished retraction explicitly correcting the vicious story you spread, and it goes directly to every single person you told. 2. You absolutely never ever contact my daughter again. 3. You get intensive psychiatric help, though I legally couldn't make you, and we absolutely all knew it. I tapped the yellow folder. In exchange, the devastating civil lawsuit inside this folder permanently stays a draft. Sign the agreement Diane sends you tomorrow, or the very next table you sit at has a federal judge sitting at the head of it. Chloe violently grabbed her expensive purse, hysterically called us all pathetic, jealous losers, and stormed out through the side gate completely without her casserole dish. And that, friends, was her sincere, heartfelt apology. Because it was the absolute only kind she possessed. In the total wreckage of the brunch, my mother sat down incredibly hard, and something happened I had absolutely never seen. Patricia cried. In front of people, when my mother finally spoke, her voice was astonishingly small. I had a younger brother, Vivian whispered, staring blankly at the table. Not a word I had ever heard in my entire life. Thomas, he was different. Like Sophie. In 1972, the doctors aggressively told my parents to send him to the state institution, and they blindly did. And we were aggressively told to never, ever speak of him again. She twisted her expensive wedding ring. I was violently taught that you hide what is inconveniently different, she said, her voice cracking, or they aggressively come and take it away. I genuinely thought I was trying to protect us. I let that profound, tragic admission sit, because generational grief absolutely deserves a beat, even when it arrives an entire lifetime late and wearing a designer apron. Then I said exactly what was undeniably true. Mom, I said gently, they absolutely don't take children away just for being different anymore, but you very nearly helped your favorite daughter aggressively try to. She flinched, exactly like I had physically slapped her. You arrogantly asked me to forcibly make her normal for one single day, I said, picking up my yellow folder. She was absolutely never the one in this family who desperately needed to change. Liam walked slowly around the table and quietly sat down in the empty chair directly beside me. The week after Labor Day, the legal paper flawlessly did exactly what legal paper does. Chloe, violently faced with a fully drafted civil lawsuit, a sworn first-hand witness, and a family who had watched her publicly detonate, signed the formal retraction in Diane's office, her jaw tight, her aggressive lawyer sitting silently at her elbow. Copies went to every single relative, to the country club list, to absolutely everyone who had been eagerly fed the engagement party story. For a deeply narcissistic woman who meticulously curated her public image exactly like an elite museum, that forced mailing was a prison sentence vastly worse than any financial fine. Liam formally broke off the engagement that exact same week and moved out of their condo permanently. He told me later it was the easiest incredibly hard thing he had ever done. The county DCFS file stayed permanently closed. Unfounded, a titanium shield with my beautiful daughter's name on it. My corporate career was entirely whole. My name, in the exact places that actually mattered, was immaculately clean, and absolutely everyone who had cowardly whispered about the smoke now intimately knew exactly who had been maliciously holding the matches. Chloe kept her real estate business, her designer dresses, and her spotless condo in the city. She simply lost the absolute only audience she had ever actually needed. Nobody in that affluent backyard has looked at her the exact same way since, and she actively did every single bit of it to herself, with 2 arrogant phone calls she thought nobody would ever trace. A few weeks later, on a quiet Saturday, my mother unexpectedly came to my house. She absolutely didn't call first, which is very Vivian, but what she carried in her hands absolutely wasn't a poisoned casserole or a passive-aggressive lecture. It was a small gift bag containing a spare set of premium, noise-canceling ear defenders, the extremely good, expensive kind, and a massive, hardcover atlas of global geological formations. I specifically asked the girl at the bookstore, Vivian said, not quite meeting my eyes, for a brilliant child who fiercely loves rocks. There was absolutely no grand speech. I absolutely didn't offer one back. She sat on my living room floor, 64 years old, in her expensive slacks, and she let Sophie show her the exact mineral composition of a quartz cluster. And when she reached out to hug her, I caught my mother's eye, and she explicitly stopped, and she respectfully asked Sophie first. Sophie said, "High five instead." And my mother took the high five exactly like it was Holy Communion. She visits strictly on my schedule now. At my house, entirely by my rules. And we are absolutely not healed, but we are brutally honest. And honest is a solid foundation you can actually build upon. Liam comes by some weekends to help me fix things I could easily fix myself. And he stays to enthusiastically talk about structural engineering and geology with Sophie. In late September, we had a beautiful birthday party in my backyard for Sophie turning 9. And the entire remaining family came, with the strict rules provided aggressively in advance. Absolutely no balloons popping, no singing at full volume. We hummed the birthday song instead, her choice. A quiet corner set up on the porch with her beanbag, no questions asked. My daughter proudly sat at the head of the picnic table in her blue headphones, the undisputed queen of a kingdom that had finally bothered to learn her language, and she laughed, her huge, unguarded laugh. And absolutely nobody, not one single person, looked at her sideways. That night, carefully tucking her in under the map wall, she pulled one ear free of the headphones. "I didn't ruin it, right, Mom?" she asked softly. "I mean, the party, meaning I profoundly think all of it." "No, my sweet baby," I said fiercely. "You absolutely never ruined anything. You never did." She was fast asleep before I reached the door, and I stood in the quiet hallway of the little house I proudly bought us, and I let myself feel every single bit of the victory. Here is exactly what that brutal summer permanently taught me. Fiercely protecting your vulnerable child absolutely doesn't always look like raising your voice. Because sometimes it looks exactly like lowering it, opening a massive yellow folder, and letting 4 grueling years of documented, relentless love speak entirely for itself. That is my story. One speaker malfunction, one anonymous phone call, and a 400-page binder that spoke infinitely louder than both. If this story profoundly reminded you that being different absolutely never means being less, or if you fiercely love someone the world constantly misunderstands, share this video with them today. Drop a comment telling me exactly what you would have done at that explosive Labor Day table. Hit subscribe, and I will securely see you in the next one on Shattered Hearts.